Your fear of not being smart enough is the same thing, because there's no such thing as needing to be smart enough to speak.
I think we have to know what part of us is being triggered by the world around us.
The people who we see traumatized are the most sensitive people.
You know, someone who's wise is someone who's curious.
I am patient zero, always and forever. The problem is always me.
They say your spouse could be your best teacher, or like you marry your unfinished business.
Anything out there that's getting my attention is coming back to something in here that's unresolved that needs to be worked out. Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right. Welcome, Eda.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with Eda Schottenstein on the In Search of More podcast. Let me see where I start. So I feel like in some ways we're somewhat of a kindred spirit. I'll explain what I mean by that. We both had an intense fear of public speaking. If you were telling the truth about yours, I was about mine. Seems like you're a little nervous now, so
yes,
it's definitely true.
Yes,
that there's it's good. I get nervous too. I was telling you just before that conversation I had with Gabor Monte at the beginning of it, I was excited to be, because it's just cool to do stuff that still make you nervous. It's like a good sign of life. I'm doing things that make me nervous.
Right.
So
excitement's on the other side of nervous, so it's coming from the same place.
I saw a sign once at a conference that said, "Fear is excitement without breath." So keep breathing.
So I guess I'm excited then.
Yeah, nervous. Yeah, it's the same thing,
it.
Right? Someone can call it nervousness, but it's also a certain excitement. So what are you excited about?
I'm excited about this opportunity. Excited to express gratitude to you for kind of paving the path for me and setting me on it. Don't know that I'd be here today if it wasn't for your his belief and involvement. So I guess I never really had the opportunity to say thank you publicly. So here I get the opportunity. I'm excited about that.
Sure. Yeah. Good venue for that.
Yep.
So I'll explain what Eda's talking about. What you're talking about. So as I've been public about, I had a terrible fear of public speaking. This is going back maybe to about, all my life, but probably 2014 or so, 2015, I felt that I needed to speak. I needed to share my story. Reached out to Rosh Lowe. It's possible he reached out to me. He trained me for some talks, and over time I kept in touch with him, and that kind of evolved into Rosh training many other people to speak publicly, including yourself. So for you, the first time you spoke was for your son Ari's bar mitzvah, right?
Yeah.
So it's about 5 years ago? What is that?
Yeah, exactly 5 years ago.
Amazing. Yeah. So can you bring us into that process? Do you remember the fears before? I'm sure you turned down many other speaking opportunities. He is your oldest.
Yep.
But I'm sure you turned down many other speaking opportunities. And what changed? What changed there?
Well, there was an opportunity before the bar mitzvah at a Shabbos table where we had these friends who would go around the table every Friday night, and everyone had to share something, either a thought or something that they would take upon themselves to do. And as they were going around the table, I would just conveniently disappear in the right time so I could leave right before my turn and come back after. And it was a big enough table where hopefully people wouldn't notice. And this happened several times until one day I thought, I don't know if this is good for my kids. You know, they're sitting at the table too. And so I looked at the bulletin, the shul bulletin that they hand out every week, and I found a little thought, and I shared it, and I was shaking. And I survived.
The Shabbos table, 10 or 15 people?
Yeah, probably just about, maybe a little more.
Okay, let's say 20 people.
But yeah, to me, that was like a public forum. Like it almost wasn't different from speaking in front of an audience.
Honestly, smaller groups are harder than bigger groups.
Yeah.
So speaking in front of 500 or 1,000, it feels like just a sea of people. Speaking in front of 10 or 20, which know you is...
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of that. Like you're seeing the reactions of the people as you speak.
Yes.
And I saw some looks of pity, like they probably felt bad. And then I started to notice after I finally got that out of the way that other people were doing it too. So people were getting up and leaving, and I paid attention. So that was comforting. I knew I wasn't alone in that whole experience.
Yeah, this is ridiculously common fear.
Yeah. And for reasons I didn't understand at the time, I thought that it was I thought I was afraid because I wasn't smart enough, or I didn't have anything compelling enough to share with anyone. So why would I speak up? But then when I knew about your experience, I would imagine you didn't feel that way, like that you're not smart enough. So what's the common denominator? What's going on that so many people are afraid? So I kept having to check myself. Like, it's not that I'm not smart enough. And then I saw this whole idea of, if you know Olive, teach Olive. Someone who's wise is someone who's curious.
Someone who's wise is someone who's curious. Yeah.
Who's curious, who learns from everybody. So that excuse was out the window. But
when you say smart enough, people talk all the time. Everyone talks. Like, where would that thought get in the head? Let's say there's someone who actually isn't smart.
Right.
Is there such a thing as not smart enough to talk?
Maybe not smart enough to command other people's attention, right? At their expense. Like, you have better things to do. Why would you be listening to what I have to say?
Okay, so I think that's more common, meaning you can say, I'm inconveniencing someone else. And then the hook that you hang the inconvenience on is, I'm not that smart. But it's a form of, because I can see how someone can arrive at that very quickly as a child, that I don't want to speak up because I'm inconveniencing my parents or the adults in my life.
Right. And specifically when I was asked to speak, like at one of my kids' preschool events, that's when I really thought, why would they ask me? I don't have anything to share. So that's when I felt like, ask someone else. I'm sure there's someone else who has a much better, much more skills, more expertise, something more than I do. But I mean, I'd love to know from what was behind your fear, because if it wasn't that, what was it? And then what's the common denominator for all of us? It's the most common fear.
What was behind my fear? I think it was a fear of emotions. So there was a sense that once, I always felt like my emotions were kind of right here. Like I had this wellspring that was about to explode on everyone. But it could be in a lot of different ways. Like it could come in the form of anger, but that was really so. Maybe more tears or just heightened emotion. And I was afraid that if I got up and spoke, it can go there. Like the emotion could spill out. That was definitely a big part of the fear. And once I got more comfortable with expressing emotion in public, then I got more comfortable speaking as well. That was definitely a big part of it. I don't think it was the only thing.
Right. Yeah.
Being seen is for sure part of it. Inconveniencing others. Appearing to be arrogant or egotistical, but that's only certain kind of speeches, not going around the Shabbos table.
Right.
So each one had its...
Yeah.
You know where I got over my fears? In 12-step meetings. Because they don't always go around the room. There was a portion in the meetings I went to where they did go around the room at the end of every meeting, and they said, just share something you're grateful for, which that you can almost get out the words before, I'm grateful for ice cream, you can say it, and just pass it on. But anytime I shared, there was these intense nerves. And I had a sponsor who just said, like every time you come to a meeting, like your participation is not only through listening, it's through speaking. Let people get to know you. And I was so committed to getting sober that he could have told me anything. So if it meant speaking in front of a group, and obviously there's a safety in a small group, and sometimes it was 4 or 5 people, but you did have to speak. It would be awkward to speak for less than a couple minutes.
Right.
So it was a couple minutes of talking, and eventually doing that 50 or 100 times, that muscle got stretched. Like I don't know if I ever would have gotten over the fear if not for 12-step meetings.
So doing it in a safe space over and over eventually led to you getting through.
Yes.
But yeah. Right.
And then from there, I went to, I made a commitment to myself that any opportunity I have to speak in public, I'm going to do so, even if it's only to say that I committed to myself that every opportunity I have, I'm going to speak in public. So all I have to say is that.
Right.
Thank you so much for listening.
Right.
Sometimes that's what I did at a Shabbos table otherwise, and just kept exercising that muscle.
Right.
But the nerves never went completely. I don't, nor do I want it to. One of the worst speeches I ever gave it felt off, and I didn't get much positive feedback either. Was at a JCW event where I had just spoken a couple days before. I came in a little bit more confident, zero nerves, and just didn't connect. I didn't feel I connected to the audience, and I didn't get any feedback that I did either. So those nerves they're not the worst thing.
Right. Like the thing that's preventing you from speaking is the very thing that will make you an effective speaker. It's like the self-doubt, like not the self-doubt, but maybe the self, for me, it was the self-doubt, like harnessing the benefits of that instead of seeing it as like a weakness.
Right. One of the first speeches I gave that was like in front of an audience and prepared, and I was invited, was at a lamplighter's dinner where the year prior, Yocheved Saidov put me on the spot and said, hey, would you like to get up and speak with 2 or 3 minutes notice? I said, no, I can never imagine doing that. And over the course of that year, having gone to meetings and everything else, and a few Shabbos tables where I said I'm going to speak,
right,
she invited me with like a couple months preparation. And then I prepared, and one of the ways I got around everything in my head was I spoke heavily about the fear.
Right.
Because that's where we get tripped up, I think, is when that's what one of the first questions I asked you is about being nervous, because if you're wondering about looking nervous, then you can lose the whole talk.
Right.
If you just talk about nervous, now it's there's nothing to.
Right. You get it out of the way.
We've slayed the dragon.
Right. So how much do you prepare before speaking? Meaning, because you don't want to be so prepared.
Right.
Where you're not, It
really depends. I don't do that much speaking anymore. Like even if I'm invited to a yeshiva, I'll speak for 5 minutes, say almost nothing, and then just Q&A.
Right.
Like I find that to be a much more meaningful use of my time, and there is to have a Q&A about these topics and just create a forum for people to speak openly and comfortably.
Right.
I haven't done a speech. I don't remember the last one I gave and prepared for. And in terms of these are discussions. I don't prepare that much.
Right.
So some more than others, but I've shared with you I had a certain topic that I wanted to discuss, which was this. And that's all. Then we see where it goes. It's just a discussion.
Right.
Now, in terms of the bar mitzvah, so you had noticed, I guess, okay, you got a reason why, right? You had this powerful fear, you had a reason why. You say, hey, my kids are noticing me.
Right.
I'm going to start speaking. So you did a few of those at a Shabbos table?
Yeah. I did probably 3 or 4. And I eventually accepted the opportunity to speak at the preschool.
Oh, you did that?
I did that.
Before Ari's bar mitzvah?
So that was before Ari's bar mitzvah.
Okay.
Yeah. But after the Shabbos table. The Shabbos table was my preparation for saying yes to that. Because I really wanted to. I felt like it was a safe space. Like the safe space aspect was very important to me. So I did that. It didn't go very well because it was my first time, and the nervousness just got me. The fight or flight for me could be very dangerous, especially having ADD where I get distracted naturally. That's my default. So you have both of those things, and I can blank very easily. So every time I'm live or I get into a conversation in front of a camera, I'm assuming that risk.
Right. So when you say it didn't go very well, it sounds like it went very well.
I think I was so nervous that other people were a little bit uncomfortable seeing how nervous I was. I don't know if it was projection. I'm not sure. But
no, that's true. It does happen.
Yeah. So, but I knew those people. I knew there were other moms at the preschool who knew that I hadn't done this before, and they knew that I was nervous. I did share that.
And many of them are as well.
Yeah. And not many of them, one in particular said, like, I would never do this. So I give you a lot of credit for doing it. Like, I wouldn't even bother. So I felt like empowered by that. I took this risk and I felt better after.
Right. I'm just wondering in terms of the repeating of the story to yourself and others when you say it didn't go very well. It sounds like it went very well because the purpose was to prepare you to be more comfortable.
Yeah. So it did go well. Right. It definitely, helped pave the path. Yes.
Okay. And then from there to his... At this point in time, you're already committed.
At this point in time, I had to find my voice. I needed to find expression through words, because up until that point, I found expression in other ways,
such as
some healthy, some unhealthy. So as a kid, I was the class clown. I got kicked out of school. I got kicked out of summer camp because I had no way to channel my energies. So, and then as I got older, it was through music. But I couldn't sit for a piano lesson. So I had to it was sort of like the Wild West channeling of my energies.
Right.
So through music, I composed music. I wrote poetry. So in that regard, words did help, but the words were very obscure. It wasn't like, with poetry, there's no rules. The stuff that didn't make sense to anyone but me. Kind of like a song, you might not understand it. It's just random words piled together and it sounds good. So it was that way. And then I guess the unhealthy manifestation of that was through projection of my own insecurities on other people. So I would express myself or react to something that was a disproportionate reaction to the actual event. And I knew that was a form of, I know now, I didn't know then, but it was a form of expression that wasn't helping me. It was a diversion of what I actually had to address. So yeah, those were the different manifestations. And eventually I decided, I don't even remember how this happened, but I decided to go to the community college. I think I had nothing. I was selling stuff on eBay for fun because at the time we had Filene's Basement as a kind of family store. I was buying things on the sale rack and selling them just to pass the time when the kids were in preschool. Then I went to Columbus State. I took a placement test just to see how poor a student I actually was. And I placed in third grade math and English as a second language. I was from Montreal, but that wasn't a good enough excuse. And I decided that I would just take developmental courses to get me up to college level. So at least I can just be on a level playing field.
You placed in third grade math?
I placed third grade math.
Wow.
But school for me was completely pointless. It was like a square peg in a round hole. I just daydreamed all day in class for whatever reason. And then I caught up and I just kept going. And I ended up like with a 4.0 GPA and then went to graduate school, same thing. So I kind of had to prove to myself, Eda, you could do this. Like you can do hard things. Like don't sell yourself short. This was all unconscious, beneath the surface. And
so are you still proving to yourself or is the fight over?
I feel like the struggle is always there. It's like you said, like we're always nervous, but we want to be nervous. I feel like if I didn't have some root there, I don't know that I would continue doing what I do, but I can't really definitively answer that question because I've come a long way since then. Am I still insecure? Sometimes, yeah. Have I grown into myself and am I working toward my potential? I'm on the path.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You see the light.
Yeah. Yeah.
When did it change for you that you went from every opportunity to speak was a major struggle or thought to, okay, I can do this. Maybe I'll be a little bit nervous, but it's not going to change what I do.
I'm still in the struggle phase. This was it was overwhelming for me thinking about doing a live interview. The more I do it, the more confident. But you said yes right away. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I'm saying, when did it go from questioning whether I will, Ari's bar mitzvah, for example, you thought a lot before.
Right.
Here you said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm uncomfortable. Great. Right. But it's not going to change what I'm going to do.
So I don't say yes to everyone. I said yes because I knew that, so I trust your judgment because years ago when you first had that thought of, maybe Eda could do this and that, whatever you did that helped me kind of get on this path, it's worked. I mean, it's been effective. So I trusted that if you were requesting that I come here, that I should say yes.
Okay.
So it was more like this particular interview.
Okay, you felt comfortable.
But any interview, I'm definitely more likely to say yes now than I was before.
Okay, hopefully after this one you feel
yes.
more ready than before.
Yeah.
So do you now know what that is or was, that energy that kind of bubbles up inside you that wants to be expressed verbally? That's what, when I shared about the kindred spirit, that's what I meant by it. Is there's some people who went about this speaking thing, even if they had an intense fear, in the way of, okay, I have this fear. Like I have a fear of heights, right? So after I went through some of the fear of speaking, I took a trip to Costa Rica, and during it, I did everything I could heights related. I don't know, rappelling and jumping off things, and just, I'm still terrified of heights, but I was determined to do something about it. And now I'm like, okay, I did that. Like I'm not going back to do that every week. And some people approach speaking in the same way, where I have an intense fear. Great, I got up on stage, I spoke, and I'm done.
Right.
And then others, and that's what I see in you and see in me, is this constant energy that needs to be expressed verbally. So I'm wondering if you've been able to put any words to that. Like, do you know what that is and what's going on?
So when I had the opportunity to interview Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom, he said something that really stuck with me. Something to the effect of, we're spiritual beings in a physical world, and we're yearning to discover our purpose. That's how we are. By we, I don't know, if he meant every single person, but I certainly related to that feeling that he had. And in order to find your purpose, you have to ask yourself the following question. What's the place where what I want to do meets what needs to be done at that intersection? And where what you want to do meets what needs to be done, that's where God wants us to be. So that, maybe initially it was more of a selfish need, like to, be more confident, this and that. I think it progressed to this place where I was starting to see the why, like through the feedback. After I did several talks where I spoke to groups or individually to people, it's where I needed to be. And I grew up around people who struggled with mental health, people that I lived amongst, and I saw what that did to them, and I knew no one talks about it, and I was comfortable enough to talk about it, where people hopefully can find comfort in my own experience.
So you found through, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, that through verbal expression, you're able to find a purpose, which is speaking about mental health related issues.
Yeah, and even beyond mental health, just anything that can help a person feel less alone in their experience. Because I really do believe that at the core, where most of us are just yearning for connection, to feel less alone, to feel understood. It's all, if you're digging, that's what we need. So right. Some people call it a godliness, spirituality, like just a connection to something greater.
Well, right. That other side of it is shame. And that's a lot of what I've spoken about for years, is the corrosive nature of shame and how it just eats away at everything. And shame does that. Shame disconnects us from the people around us. So the reverse of that is that connection for sure. How is it? I know you run Multi-Role Woman, your podcast From the Inside Out. Can you give some sense of like areas of focus, right? From the outside, I don't know what's more, what's less, and what you're driving towards with each of them.
Right. So there's very little focus, meaning I guess if we're talking like turning struggles into strengths, my struggle was that I couldn't focus on one task and follow through to the end until I finished college. That was the first time I had felt that feeling of, wow, I finished what I started. Right. Up until then, like, even if making dinner, I would cook dinners, but then like the kitchen would be a complete wreck, and so there was like a certain lack of follow through. And I also had many kind of unchanneled energies, like skills, talents, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to put out music. I wanted to, believe it or not, be a hip hop dancer when I was a teenager. I had all these different dreams and goals that I couldn't. It felt like you're at a busy intersection and nobody's directing traffic. So there's like all these things going on. And so I channeled it into Multi-Role Woman, meaning I found a way to at least organized things a little bit, kind of like found a traffic person,
Okay, gotcha.
to direct the traffic, but there's still a bunch of things happening. My main goal is to just share whatever I can to help make the world an easier place to live in.
Got it. Is there a central message, a central theme to what you speak about? Can you, like Raj had his billboard exercise?
Right.
Do you have that?
I guess two things. The first is there's a book called The Obstacle is the Way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or like you find your purpose on the path you take to avoid it, something like that. So I don't know if this is like a mission statement, but certainly like don't discount your struggles, use them to harness them to, find your purpose. I guess is more what I learned rather than more a billboard headline, but I think we make a big mistake when we like the Torah Sinai, that I don't know what the English term for it is, but like we take one person's teachings or advice and just ascribe to that fully without recognizing that we're very unique and there's no one like us. And there's no precedent for our experience that we can look to know how to live our lives. So we're really like, we're doing this all in real time and we're unique. And we have to be aware of like our way. There's a great story. I don't know if you watch, there's a documentary about one of the best sushi chefs in the world.
I haven't seen
in Japan. Forget what it's called, but he's like one of his restaurant, you can't get a reservation for years out. So he's just sharing his story. And he said he was asked to speak for a group of students. And he stood in front of this massive bunch of students and he was trying to figure out what he should say about success. Should I say work hard, do well in school? I can't say that because he said I can't say that because I didn't do well in school and I didn't work hard. I was a bit of a rebel. Should I say don't follow the rules, do your thing? I can't say that either because I don't want to get anyone in trouble for not following the rules. So there's really nothing I could say that would accurately reflect, my experiences and then like passing it on to them. So he said he wouldn't share what he ended up sharing with these kids, which is interesting, kind of leaves it to the imagination. But I think the point is, find your way and don't be afraid of the road less traveled, of, how you get there.
So leaning into that struggle.
Somewhat. Yeah. I think that was a bit of a ramble, but I'm just, I guess, formulating it as I'm saying it. But
that's the purpose of this. It's a discussion, not a speech.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You mentioned feedback that you receive from people. Is there some that's more meaningful than others? Is there one that comes to mind?
I think it's less what was said, more who it was from.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very careful about who I listen to. So feedback from, from you, from Rosh, from my family, from people I respect. And I've read like tons of self-help books, and I always Googled the author of the book. Like as I was reading it, like I was curious to know like who's the person behind the teaching.
Oh, interesting.
And I always wanted to see like their bio. If this is someone who I would want to emulate, someone whose values I respect, then I'm really reading it and I'm taking notes and absorbing it. If it's someone who maybe I don't connect to or don't respect, someone who's doesn't walk the walk, the book, I'll read it if it's interesting, but it doesn't really hold.
You're not taking notes.
Right.
That's fascinating. I've never done that. I've read so many books, I don't even know the author.
Right.
It never bothered me to.
Which is also good
sense.
because you just take what works for you. I get that.
Yeah. Both make sense.
Right.
There's value.
Different.
Both.
Yeah.
I think Maimonides says, follow the message, not the medium. Like just look at the message for what it is, not who it came from, because sometimes we can start ascribing special powers to people. But on the other hand, sometimes you're listening to someone who doesn't have what you want. So
right.
Why?
Right. And on the other side of that, there's, examine the morals and ethics of the people that you look to for life advice. So there's like, I guess, both those ways of doing things. But I could see how both are valuable in their own way.
So how do you combine idea of a role model, right, which we all agree is someone important, with the idea of every person is unique on their journey and has there's no one to follow exactly because we're all so unique.
Right.
So how do you?
Right. So there's, first of all, it's easier to filter out people that you don't respect, let's just say, right? People like who are your core people. There's a great exercise that I did when I was coaching, where I asked people to name.
When you were coaching others? When
I was coaching others, yeah. Okay. At a certain point, I was doing individual coaching. And I said, just name 7 people who you admire and respect. It could be any 7. They could be dead, alive, a character from a movie, mm-hmm. fictional character. And they wrote those names down, and they would list the things about those people that they admire and respect. 3 or 4 things for each person. Mm-hmm. And then they would find like common denominators, like what keeps showing up among those people. And if there's something showing up, let's say 5, 6, 7 times, then that's sort of a
indicator.
Yeah. So you have both. So you're making it unique to you, because you need role models, but you also want to find your path. It's sort of like a
right. So the purpose of what you're explaining there is I'm not necessarily following one, but I'm taking enough from 7 people that I'm able to.
Right. It's almost like a buffet, choosing what works for me, and hopefully that combination of things will enable me to become a better person, to grow and not, fall back.
So I have this theory. I shared it with Rudy Rahman. I'll share it with you. Maybe you heard that episode, because Rudy surprisingly had a fear of public speaking as well. Doesn't look like it. He also claims to be an introvert. I do as well. I'm pretty sure you do as well.
Mm-hmm. So does Oprah, by the way.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, not surprised.
You never know.
That you mentioned.
Yep.
So I shared it with him, and what I'd say, because one of the fears I connected to about speaking was the fear of inconveniencing others, which maybe I was projecting, but it sounded to me like your fear of not being smart enough is the same thing, because there's no such thing as needing to be smart enough to speak. The reason why I pulled that apart is because I felt like, if, let's say there's someone who's actually not that smart,
right,
listening, and they know they've documented it, they have a low IQ or whatever else, they've figured it out. They measured themselves in 3rd grade math, and they're still in 3rd grade math even after 20 years of trying.
Right.
They still have a right to speak.
They have a right, but should they be given a platform? Like,
it depends for what.
Right.
But what's a platform? Going around a meal at first of all, everyone has a platform now, so no one has to listen.
Which became a problem in a way. Like, you have people who
no one has to listen.
Right.
No one has to listen.
Right. It's true.
So we're doing this. No one's forced to listen.
Right.
Not even my wife. No one's forced to listen.
Right.
But someone who's not, you gave the example of being afraid of sharing a personal anecdote at a Shabbos table and being afraid of that. I'm sure there were many other examples where you were uncomfortable speaking, even if it was to introduce someone. Okay, read this introduction of someone else.
Right.
You still would have felt that way. I imagine so, right? I'm not, that would be my feeling, so I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That it really wasn't about that. So one of the things that I found in myself was this fear that I'm inconveniencing other people when I'm speaking. That's why it's one of the reasons I won't. Saying, how would a child come to that place? What I share with Rudy is that obviously no one comes to the world with a fear of public speaking. That's impossible. Because, 2 hours old and you're hungry, and
right.
if you're not willing to be public about it, they may not know, and they may not give you the bottle you need. So obviously it's not there. Somewhere it gets hit someone. And obviously there's 2 ways this can happen. It's like anything else. There's trauma and sensitivity, and kind of that balance of traumatic experience and sensitivity is someone's experience, right? Someone more sensitive with less traumatic experience will have just as much trauma as someone less sensitive with a very traumatic experience.
Right.
So, but by and large, we find that the people who we see traumatized are the most sensitive people, right? Meaning it's,
right.
Yes, there's very serious trauma, but by and large, we find a correlation between highly sensitive people who are the ones presenting trauma that either are in addiction recovery or many of the other manifestations of trauma. So my thought process was the same thing with public speaking, is that you have a child who is very sensitive. one of the reasons they were sensitive could be because, especially sensitive to their verbal expression. And one of it could be because they were thoughtful. So their words didn't come like rolled off their tongue, right? If someone walks into your home or my home, they're more likely to get into a conversation with my wife or your husband than
Right.
me or you.
Right.
Right. But we're the ones who are doing this.
Right.
Right. So what's connection, right? Same thing with, I don't know if it's the case with others, but for example, Rudy called himself an introvert, right? What did he mean by that? That if you, I mean, he actually said it, is that if he's sitting around a table, he's not the one most likely to engage with others. And I think one of the things that get people to that place of, I'm not going to speak, is that their words come from, it's thoughtful expression. So the words come from kind of deep inside. So I remember experiencing that a couple of times. Was I thought about something I wanted to say and then saying it and then it not being received. That rejection feels like profound rejection. It could be because there was something else on
Right.
an adult figure's mind at that point. But I'm talking about this experience as a child. It could be that there was something else on their mind, but I experienced that as profound rejection. If I didn't think that much before I spoke, then
Right.
it might not have
Right.
meant as much.
Right.
That's all might have been the next thought. I likely wouldn't have internalized that expression. I saw a quote the other day. It said 50% of people have something to say and don't say it, and the other 50% have nothing to say and keep repeating it. So I know where I was. I don't know where I am now. We'll let the audience decide. But that period of time, right, where someone is sitting there with something to say and can't say it, oftentimes that I found is like that it comes from like somewhere incredibly deep. Like, let me ask you this. You wrote a couple of songs, right? Were those hard to share?
By share, do you mean like put them out once they were recorded? There was a certain amount of vulnerability for sure to it.
That was more than getting up and giving a speech. Different,
yeah, because it wasn't like a direct interaction with the listener.
Right.
So maybe if I was like playing it for someone who was sitting next to me and watching their reaction, I'd be maybe similar reaction.
Right. My hypothesis that I'm playing with is that being that a song will come from, like you're thinking through, it's coming from somewhere, hopefully.
Right.
Right. It's coming from somewhere deep inside. Then putting that out into the world, it's like, hey, if this isn't received well, that's like
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, the feedback I got from some people, and that's what made me much more careful about whose feedback I absorb. But one song is, I wrote it after I did a crisis intervention course, suicide prevention, things like that. And I discovered something that I was surprised by, that the people with the highest rate of suicide are Caucasian males between the ages of 18 and 30. And I thought that's so interesting in a world where they're like, perceived to be like the privileged class. It almost didn't make sense. And so I just started to like think a lot about it, what's going on in their minds. And like I connected to that experience. And so that I went very deep for that song. And somebody said something to me like, "Oh, are you suicidal?" Something like that. "Is that coming from you?" I didn't know what to answer. Like I was just shell shocked. And that was like a vulnerable moment. Like, oh, is this TMI? Am I exposing too much by writing a song about suicide? So that was, a tough moment.
Like you felt it.
I felt it. Yeah. It hurt.
Felt like misunderstood.
Yeah. Like rejected in a way, like, oh, work through your stuff before. Okay, I was hearing, I'm sure they didn't mean harm in saying what they said, but I definitely,
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So where to from here? Do you have with all of these talents, energies, channeling, cross guard, what do you call them? Safety guards or crossing
like
cops?
A four-way intersection with someone now directing
like giving
traffic.
direction.
Like I have a CEO in my brain now.
So with all that, do you have a place where this is going?
I have a direction, and I have values behind the direction, values that guide me, but I don't have a specific goal. I have a vision, like for an ideal life, let's say. I know from Tony Robbins, he says, we underestimate what we can do. We overestimate what we could do in a year. We underestimate what we could do in a decade.
Right.
So I know to have like patience and trust that this will lead me to where I'm supposed to be. And I do feel like I'm headed in the right direction.
The journey, kind of goes through a process, right? I think everyone goes through a certain process. So at first it feels kind of somewhat internal, where there's this, it's not exactly linear, but at first it feels somewhat internal, where there's something I'm looking for, something I'm finding, and something I'm trying to figure out. And then when I do, then there's this external quality to it, where it's, okay, let me share this, let me give back, let me express this. It's more externally focused. Even though there's, like I said, it's not exactly linear, and we can be going on through two different of those at the same time in our life. So for example, from a financial aspect, we could be at a place where we figure we found something and we're ready to give back, but from a mental health aspect, we don't feel that way. But focused on where you are, if you connect to this internal versus external, do you feel like you're still more in the internal part of the process, or more, or coming towards the external?
It's a good question. I think it's still a tug of war. I don't, I would have to understand better what external means. Like,
I'll give you an analogy.
Yeah.
So in your own story earlier, you said that when everyone was going around the Shabbos table, you left.
Right.
What happened when you finally spoke? You noticed that other people were leaving too.
Right.
Right. But you didn't notice that before.
Right.
Because you were caught
in
internally.
Myself. Right. Right.
And then at some point in time, you say, hey, I figured this out. I'm going to go and speak. So now you've overcome the internal challenge. I no longer have to hide when we're going around the table.
Right.
And being that you have, now you can focus externally and say, oh my goodness, here's these 4 or 5 people that are going through the same experience. Let me share with them what I found. That's what it means if I know Aleph, teach Aleph.
Right.
Like this struggle, like I know how to pass Super Mario level 1. Let me tell you how to do it. That's
so funny
right?
You're saying that. I was thinking about Super Mario earlier, like the levels. When you're stuck in the first level, that's all you know. But then when you get to the next level, it's like a different consciousness almost. I don't know that.
Right, on that problem.
Yeah.
On that problem. Each one is is different.
Right.
Right. Like with like my weight and diet and stuff like that, I'm still Super Mario level 1. So like anyone can something. It's something that doesn't
That's subject to interpretation.
You can compare it to others, but as far as me making progress in my own
in
goals,
your own mind. Got it.
I have not, not in my own mind, in my own body. I have not figured it out. So, okay, granted, I haven't hit 300 pounds, but the discomfort that I have with where it's at, I have not figured out how to get past a couple weeks on it. So I'm saying I'm not, no one here pretending that, oh, we're at level 1, someone has level 2, level 10. No, there's different parts of the journey. And like I said, someone could be financially in a certain place, and mental health in a different place, and physical health in another place. So there's no hierarchy going on here. It's just, hey, I know this trap. I know this idea of running away from the table before the mic comes to me. I figured that out, and then I go externally.
Right.
And I notice others with the same struggle.
Right.
So, but that's in the micro. In the macro, there's also a sense like, okay, I've turned the corner on this and I'm focused externally. So did that analogy help in terms of?
Yeah. So if I was putting a number on it, I would say 70-30 external. Like I'm definitely more externally focused now. But
you still feel that there's stuff internally that you want to.
I think there's always going to be. I think if I'm a seeker, I'm always internally focused on some level because I'm evolving as a human. Like I don't feel that I've reached my own, internal potential, if that makes any sense. But I'm noticing what the world needs more so than like my own experience and how I'm gonna,
So so what is that? What is it that the world needs? In your
the world needs to be more connected and more understanding of our differences, and recognizing that we're all just projecting on each other. And if we can just go down a layer, that
down a layer meaning internally, or down a layer with other people, like understand what's beneath them?
I think we have to know what part of us is being triggered by the world around us. So there's a lot of hate. There's like the suicide rates gone up, and there's just, it's so much, there's chaos everywhere, and a lot of drama that's unnecessary. I think people don't realize two things. First of all, that they're projecting. And second of all, that it's in their best benefits. It's in their benefit to get on it, because everyone's happier. Like, do you want to be angry and bitter, angry at someone? Like, why would you want that?
Right. Meaning you're saying go in.
Go in. Yeah.
Go in. Those things that are triggering you,
they're not going to be resolved
when you
outwardly
fix those.
If you're not internal.
Yeah.
Also, it's like resentment is taking a pill and hoping the other person gets hurt. Right. You're taking the pill, but why are you doing it? You're getting hurt. So I think that's right. What needs to be fixed and changed.
So the saying I love is, some people would rather cover the world in leather than put on a pair of shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's what you see the world needs help. And you had mentioned Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, talking about the intersection between what the world needs and what you like to do.
Yeah.
So what you like to do as far in relation to what the world needs, what is that?
So if it was just me making the decision without talking to people that I respected, I'd probably just be coaching one-on-one, because then I'd feel like I'm making an impact one person at a time. But I've been told by people that I respect, like, if you can have a bigger platform and share your message globally, it would be insane to not do it. Meaning, when I started the podcast, it was just more little conversations between me and my podcast partner, who's a friend.
Right.
I wasn't intending to like bring on these big people. It was like an evolving project just for, to share what we know with other people.
Who are some of your favorite guests you've had on the podcast?
My mom was my
I
favorite.
listened to that one,
yeah, because she's. I mean, I get my personality kind of from her. Like, she's an introvert. She doesn't like to share. My father's more kind of, he's the
more outgoing.
Yeah, more outgoing. Yeah. And Rabbi Sachs. I guess Rabbi Sachs got the most feedback in terms of like impact.
Right.
There's several. I don't know that I have. Like, each one was so different. But I would say my mom was my favorite, maybe because I was most comfortable in that conversation.
Okay, so so you. I don't want to lose the point where we started. Yeah. You had mentioned that if you were listening to yourself, you would do one-on-one coaching.
Mm-hmm.
If you were doing a podcast, people you respect have said, hey, if you have the ability to have an impact, why not?
Right, including Rabbi Sachs, who said, where what you want to do meets what needs to be done. Based on the podcast growth, it was clearly what needed to be done. So that's where I was and am to an extent.
Right. A podcast can totally be used for one-on-one coaching. There are podcasts like that.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, they do one-on-one coaching.
Yeah.
So I'm coachable. Coach me. There's actually one. Christine Hassler has a podcast. I don't know if you know who she is.
Not familiar.
So I did a webinar with her and her husband.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like towards the beginning of the pandemic.
That.
So she has a podcast. I forget. The name is escaping me. I need someone to look that up.
But I saw I saw that webinar. That's right. How I know who she is.
But that's what she does. She coaches people live on air. It's much different than coaching.
It's like Lori Gottlieb does that too. She's like the therapist in therapy. She wrote a book called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. So she did, and Esther Perel, I think, also does that with couples.
Live coaching.
Yeah, not live. No, it's a podcast where she does therapy on couples therapy.
But she records them.
She records them. Yeah,
right. She records them and puts them out there.
Yeah,
right. I'm saying maybe there's a way to to do everything.
True.
You had said earlier in terms of leaning into your struggles. So I kind of have two questions, and obviously I'll ask it. We'll go where you go. And then in terms of parts of the conversation you want to cut out if you choose to,
Okay.
we can totally do that, including the fact that I said that we cut out anything.
Okay.
That can be cut out too, or not, whichever you want.
Okay.
It's been a topic of conversation on for me over the last, I don't know, let's say month or two, around plant medicines. Earlier today, I spoke with Rabbi Harry, who is very vocal about plant medicines, and obviously understanding all the legal stuff around there, and recommend to everyone that they do it in the appropriate way. Do you have thoughts on it? Do you have opinions on it? Do you to say on the topic?
Yeah, I have thoughts and opinions that, and I just want to disclaimer: I'm not as educated. I don't feel educated enough to make any, statements on it. But
personal experience.
It's personal experience. So the Lubavitch Rebbe is someone who, if I'm dealing with a dilemma, I look to his teachings for guidance on whatever issue is his issue of the moment. So I was very curious to know what his thoughts were on it. And it was interesting. I found a letter that he had written to someone about LSD. So it's, not.
I'm familiar with the letter, yeah.
Yeah. So it was interesting because he seemed to imply that if something is pikuach nefesh, which is essentially like you're helping save a life, the medium doesn't matter. You're doing it because you are trying to preserve life, which is holy and sacred, and it's important. It's priority over anything, even keeping Shabbos for people who are super strict about that. So that was comforting to me. And then my intention became, or I should say, my goal became to really understand the intention behind my desire for healing through that medium. And I knew that it was mental health for me. I wasn't doing it recreationally. I was doing it for fun. So I didn't do the mother of all,
right.
I didn't do the ayahuasca, but I did like a mild version of that. And I did see the
appeal.
Absolutely.
The healing.
Yeah. It certainly, yeah.
So what's interesting about that letter, I've seen the letter, and it seems to be like a Mona Lisa kind of, meaning it's like whatever, like you look at it from different directions and people come to different conclusion. Some people have shown me this letter. Look, you see, the Rebbe said you can't do this. And I say, look, you see, the Rebbe said for healing, it's okay.
Interesting.
So
where's the you can't do this? Like, what's the argument?
It wasn't an optimistic letter. Like, oh yes, for sure, there's something wonderful. It was kind of this thing, if it had any purpose, would be for physical health. But even then, may not be necessary. And you can read it as, I know some person who read that as physical health, but not mental health. I'm like, that's right. That's a real stretch for me.
Right.
So
right.
What I'm saying is the letter itself, like I've seen different people interpret it different ways. So I'm not sure that the letter itself will be enough to just anyone. Right. Someone may find what they're looking for in that particular letter. The other part of it is specific to LSD. I don't know that many practitioners who are using this medicinally. Right. I mean, the primary purpose, I'm sure it exists and some people do, but as far as I know, the primary use of that specific substance, and each one is very different, the primary use of that specific substance is more in the recreational realm or mystical, spiritual. I don't know if there are that many therapists, and it could be because of the length of time, not because of the chemical, just that it's a very long experience. So a therapist to charge someone for 12 hours may just not work that well. So they'll use it. They'll use something like mushrooms, which have a shorter effect, or MDMA, which has even a shorter effect than that. So it could be because of the time period. That's why it's not used medicinally that much. But I don't. Maybe there's something to the fact that it was written about that specific substance. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
So regardless, I think everyone, I mean, with or without a Rebbe letter, everyone understands that pikuach nefesh like pushes everything.
Right.
And I asked the rabbi this question, like, what does it mean? Pikuach nefesh. Does someone literally have to be at the verge of death? And he said, no, poverty is a form of death. Depression is a form of death. All of these things are in that spectrum. We don't have to say that someone has to literally be the difference between living and dying in order to say it's pikuach nefesh. If someone's life has been sucked out of them because they have an unhealed trauma as a child, that too is pikuach nefesh, even though we don't have any attempted suicide or contemplated suicide.
It's very true.
Any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
So are you comfortable sharing any aspect of that experience that enabled a healing that you weren't able to access despite putting the work in, right? There's been no shortage of work on your part to heal what needs to be healed.
Right. So have you heard of the emotion code?
I have heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to me, there's sort of a parallel of unblocking you through the chakras or however it's done in ways that you maybe previously weren't able to. So specifically with plant medicine, it once you see something, you can't unsee it. And so it kind of opens up your mind to this, I mean, but it's this new way of seeing things. It's like a perspective shift that it enabled me to go to a place that I wasn't able to go to through traditional therapy and medication. And I wasn't dealing with major mental health issues, and I was doing a ton of work, and I even became a therapist. So do I think it's for everyone? No, but I think there's a preparation. I also believe that there's no magic pill, but if that's one piece of the puzzle of your healing journey, then I support that. But if I think someone is just curious and they want to try it, I've met people who did it like many times, so maybe some people need to do it more often than others. But that part I don't really understand, like how much more a person needs to get to where they need to be after several times doing it. So again, I'm not educated enough to know or to fully understand, but that's sort of my thinking on that. Like I think once, twice, 3 times, and then that should hopefully set you on the path. But this is my own, to an extent, ignorant view.
Right. The question is what the path is.
Right.
So there's a part of it that, like you said, is always evolving.
Right.
But there is too frequent. There's definitely too frequent. So from my experience and speaking to many people who've gone through it, there's this combination of, it's called the journey, which is the experience while under the medicine, psychedelic, mind-altering substance, while in that space, and then the learnings, or they call the integration period from this. And some people strip the integration from the journey, and as a result, they keep going back. But what I found with certain medicines, let's say ayahuasca, probably psilocybin would be in the same category, is that they're somewhat self-correcting. So if someone overuses, at a point they will have that journey which explains to them that they're overusing in a way that a human being could never explain to them that they're overusing. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying that I've seen that. I've seen people who I felt were overusing, and then they found out. Because when you say perspective shift, what perspective shift is, like one way of saying it is, I'm seeing more truth. There's a lot of this. I don't know. That rock has many different truths depending on which angle we're looking at. Right. And perspectives. The more perspectives I get of that rock, the more truth I see of that rock. So I want to say complete truth, but one of the things it does, and it's done for me, I can give a silly example. I would say silly, a benign example of that with my wife. Or one of the first experiences that I had on it, it just showed me how so many of the disagreements we have, I wasn't seeing her perspective at all. So it's silly, but I was never very comfortable spending money on myself. I was comfortable giving. I wasn't comfortable spending money on myself. That bothered my wife. So she encouraged me, hey, like when you're flying, you're giving money to people, fly business class, fly first class, take care of yourself, stay in nice hotels. Don't treat yourself like that. It's a sign of disrespect to be willing to give away so much money and not do it for myself.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
why would you do that?
Right.
So I shut her out saying, okay, you just like nice stuff and want nice things. So you're telling me flying this way. And this kind of was at a standstill, right? She had her opinion and I had mine. And suddenly, like one of the first experiences I had, I was brought to a trip she took to California without me, and she slept on her sister's couch. And the truth of that was like very real in front of me. And I was like, no, she wasn't saying that when we travel together, then we should stay in nice hotels, because she was saying that when I was there, when she wasn't alone, she was very comfortable sleeping on a couch. It was a specific instruction to me, but I'd shut it down because of my own, whatever, stories or stuff. I just wanted to be resistant on this point. And suddenly I had a perspective shift, literally a perspective shift. And this wasn't, it seems so obvious. We're all stuck in a million ways on so many of these things in our life. And this was one that was causing a minor amount of pressure. Like I said, it's benign, but it does, I think it does explain the kind of shifts. For me and my wife, it was a big deal.
Right.
The fact that, I see where she's coming from in this regard. And then it did allow for some important healing to happen, because if my wife was right, then there was a disrespect that was going on. And what was that about?
Right.
And what was that discomfort?
Right.
And then now I had to, the perspective shift wasn't just a resolution of our conflict. It was also a invitation, more than an invitation, a pull. Like I had to. Now I had to look at what was she seeing, and where was that coming from? And that's opened up. That would be I'm happy to talk about almost everything, but that would be a journey in its own, talking about what I realized from that. But just, I think I shared enough in terms of the possibility that comes about from a perspective shift.
Was it specifically through the psychedelic journey that opened up your perspective and your mind, or was it something else? Are you saying that
it came clear to me on a journey?
Interesting.
Right. The tension around this point came up. I'm seeing her perspective. I'm seeing mine, and boom, there I am, and I'm seeing her, like in my mind, I'm seeing her sleeping on the couch, and then my whole story suddenly evaporated. Right. The story I was telling myself, where she wants nice stuff, and that's why she's telling me to.
Just a story.
Right? It was just a story. It wasn't true. And she traveled alone. She was very comfortable sleeping on her sister's couch. It was my story. Right. And then what?
And then
Then what is true? What is true was her perspective.
Right.
That there was some disrespect I was showing myself, and what was that about? And where was that discomfort? And what were the fears there? And what were the beliefs about myself? What were the beliefs about the world? And all of this other thing that it uncovers. That it allows for.
Yeah. That's the ultimate goal, is to own our part.
That's what you were saying earlier, right? We're triggered by someone else, and it's so easy to focus outward.
Right. And specifically with couples, forget where I read this, but he was saying, he's a couples therapist. He said that we assume that in a couple's relationship, there's 100%, and we're splitting that up. It's like, well, you're 80% responsible and I'm 20% responsible for this problem. When in reality, we each have 100, so it's 200%. And if we're owning our 100%, and they're owning their 100%, then that's really the goal. But we're not seeing things that way. We're in like a divided sort of like pizza pie, zero-sum game world.
And what I would say is, even though we've taken it and we've had this perspective shift and have this experience, as I sit with you now, I'm stuck in one with my wife right now, and I can't see it. Right? Meaning
But if you're saying you can't see it,
no,
then
meaning there's a point of tension.
Okay.
Where I'm not feeling the 100%. Meaning, as you're saying, I'm not feeling the 100%.
Okay.
So I can know it's true intellectually, but I'm fairly certain that were I to enter a state, and this tension would clarify itself, I would see additional perspectives that would point it back to me. One of the things I like to say is that we are patient zero, always and forever. I shouldn't even say we are, because then I'm making it too big. I am patient zero, always and forever. The problem is always me, and the solution is always me, and it's always coming back to something anything out there that's getting my attention is coming back to something in here that's unresolved that needs to be worked out.
Right.
Always and forever.
Right.
I am patient zero.
Right.
Do you think it's ironic that we sit there with microphones? I kind of alluded to this earlier, that we sit there with microphones and our respective spouses don't when they're very comfortable speaking. Do you think there's something there?
So it is in my experience because my spouse does have a microphone too. We spent the weekend in West Palm Beach, and they were asking one of us to speak. I think he was pointing more to me as the podcast,
Right.
wife. And I was adamantly against it, not because I was scared. I mean, I don't like to speak on the spot. I do need to have time to prepare mentally. That was one of the reasons, but mainly he is really good at that. And it's interesting how,
What is that?
At expression, speaking publicly, stating a point with impact, and really, bringing in the crowd. Like, he's really good at that, which was interesting that I took on that role when I already had, they say your spouse could be your best teacher, or like you marry your unfinished business. So he reflected all the things that I wasn't, and maybe desired in a way, his ability to express very easily. It's interesting what you said earlier about the confidence factor. Like, people who are very confident speaking, maybe there's not as much thoughtfulness, which could be true. But he manages to kind of have both. Like, he has the thoughtfulness and the ability to speak. So yeah, I mean, he does. We both do it, just in very different ways.
Right, it's true. I what I meant is that Freddie also is quite talkative, right? And
smart and
right,
confident.
she'll get more and more comfortable speaking. I don't question that. It's more of the constant need for expression. That's what I mean. That
Right.
There's some sense that, like, this is here often. There's so much that needs to get out.
Right.
That's what, and the more I get out, the more it seems like I get filled with and needs to come out.
Right.
Right. It seems like a never ending. That's what I.
Right.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. I don't know. I would kind of turn the question back to you and get your thoughts on it. What do you think it is?
How would you articulate the question so I can hear it and answer it?
Like, is it ironic that the spouse who it comes more naturally to is not the one doing it as much as the one who's, not
Right.
as
It's not
comfortable
only
doing
spouse, it's people.
Or, yeah.
No, I think it is. I think they're connected. I think they're definitely connected. There's definitely it's funny that you gave that example, because in my case, a lot of it was around the emotion of expression, right? I was uncomfortable expressing where there would be emotion.
Got it.
My wife is very comfortable in that regard.
Right.
Like, you gave a different example for what your husband's comfortable with.
Okay. Right. So I misunderstood the question.
No. You must have the question, saying that comfort he had was specifically in your area of discomfort,
Right.
which was that kind of command of the room, which
Right.
is very second nature.
But
to him.
also the freedom of expression too.
Exactly.
And that's really,
But freedom
Yeah.
of, like, it's more like captivating kind of expression. Like, I can captivate your attention and drive home a point.
right.
My wife has very comfortable emotional expression.
Right. Right.
Right. That's what I show, that emotional expressing affection, compliments, anything that would create an emotional tension in this
Right.
interaction. That's what, like, threw me off. So what you said about it was 100% correct. What you said about the spouse reflecting something that's specific to us. Like, there's similarities, but there's also differences. So it was good that you put the question back on me, because it made me think, yes, there's something specific to me that she's comfortable with that I'm not. But yeah, I guess because that's not there for her as intensely, there's never this sense that there's something bottled up. It can just kind of go.
Right.
I mean, maybe there is now for her. I don't know. But for me, there's certainly, there certainly is. You had mentioned earlier about leaning into struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, it's no secret that your family's been going through a lot of struggle over the last year and a half. Is there a way you've leaned in or not leaned in yet into that struggle? I'm relating specifically to the your husband's legal issues.
We've grown stronger. We have, and I guess
You're saying you as a couple, your family, you individually?
me, us as a couple, our family.
And is there a message you're giving yourself through all of this? Something that you feel you could be doing better?
It's taught me to be less judgmental, even though I had been working on that for a while. To steer clear of gossip, and if I have questions, go directly to the person and speak to them about it, as opposed to getting information from other sources. Do my due diligence, get educated if I don't know enough. For me, that's been a big lesson for me, is to
not jump to conclusions.
Not jump to conclusions.
Is there a way we can tie all parts of this conversation together?
Maybe for someone who is looking to tap into the maybe not yet expressed part of themselves, someone who feels like they're looking for their purpose, through expression. I could say in my own experience, there's been a certain amount of discomfort that is required to get to that place. And I think a lot of people are reluctant to move through. I'd say the lessons are, number one, it's completely unique to you. There's no precedent. There's no way of knowing, 100% what the path is without trying it. And that obviously will lead to discomfort. And also to not assume this ties into our last conversation about thinking we know. It's like, don't assume that you know anything really. And I used the example in one of my conversations about Abraham. Do you think he could have imagined when he was sitting in his tent, like an airplane flying in the sky? I mean, it was unfathomable to him, yet we live under the same sky. We're in the same earth. So your potential is really limitless, but we keep, our expectations will determine our reality, not the other, shouldn't be the other way around. So just kind of like, you don't know much, you don't know anything, just keep going, and you can get to places you never thought you could. And I guess I can end with a great story I heard from my nephew, who's a musical prodigy.
Mm-hmm. How long does he have to be called a prodigy? He's been called a prodigy for like 10 years.
He actually, I should say former, because you have to be right. Be a kid to be a prodigy. He was like the youngest student ever admitted into the Schulich School of Music. I mean, he's like
Mozart wasn't a prodigy anymore when he was, I don't know.
Right. I guess I'm just so accustomed to saying that. He's like 21 and he's married. So let's just say he's a former child musical prodigy. And he just shared something with me that his professor, he's in a master's program now for music, that his professor shared with him that I really liked. He said, our brains can only process at a rate of 250 milliseconds or a quarter of a second. So if you're playing the piano, you're playing one note every quarter second. That's what you can process. But a person like him can play 13 notes.
Every quarter second?
Every quarter second. Maybe it's every second.
Oh, regardless, it's faster than...
No, it's 4 notes per second. So it's 4 notes per second, 1 note per quarter second. So It's 13 notes per second.
Oh, wow.
Is what he can do. And he said, you can't even speak it that quickly, let alone play it. But you're basically hacking your own brain. You're creating these mechanisms that you never knew you had, that make no sense based on brain science, and you're outsmarting yourself.
I've seen that with I think it was with a tennis serve, like the reflex that's needed to hit a ball coming that fast at you,
right?
And not knowing which direction would go is just
right.
It's faster than the brain can process.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was great. It just kind of gives me hope and
meaning there's a possibility to unlock much more than even science can measure.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying that.
That's my job.
Usually I say things as I understand them, but usually it doesn't come out in
it's just perfect.
Clear enough. Yeah. So some food for thought.
Right. In terms of, I thought, there's our conversation went several different places. It started with this expression. So I'd love to tie it together. And I'm wondering if maybe we can try this on. Had you not gone through this process of confronting the fear of speaking, getting out there, expressing regularly, sharing your mental health journey, those different ways of just saying, I'm not going to be, held back by my comforts. Would that have changed your reaction in a meaningful way that you can understand to the experiences of the last year and a half with your husband and the community?
Would my reaction have been different had I not gone through all of this?
If you didn't have this expression, if you didn't, where we started the conversation, if you didn't go through that process of learning to speak publicly, pushing yourself in the podcast, and whichever ways that took, whichever ways that expression took form, if you had not gone through that process, would you have been less prepared to deal with what your family had to deal with in the last year and a half?
100% yes. It would have been, I can't say for sure, but judging by the way I was before I took this role on, I could say that I would have been far less equipped for sure.
What do you think would have happened?
I've struggled to even go there, but I would say some form of numbing, maybe.
Right, but the likelihood that you'd be sitting, living an everyday life somewhat comfortably with friends, family, positivity, hope. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
What's the likelihood that would be the case had I not
had you not
done
done
this?
It, yeah.
It's a tough question to answer. It's definitely more likely, less likely that I would be equipped.
You would be able to equip to handle this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, so I've found that repeatedly that I've been put in situations, or life has put me in situations that I simply would not have been prepared for were it not for the ways I've leaned in, certainly my mental health journey.
Right.
I can share a lot of this podcast just to tie it all together, because that's what the initial motivation to speak with you was about. That was the expression that I'm trying to figure it out for myself. Right. I'm not interviewing. I'm still trying to gain something for me in this process. Right. That's the purpose of this.
Same here. Yeah.
So I said, maybe you can say something in a way that will land for me in terms of why this expression feels so necessary to me, because it seems like you're going through that same process. And that was the purpose of this. But the way this podcast started, it didn't start as a podcast. It was what happened is as soon as COVID hit, it became so clear to me that so many people were overwhelmed in ways that I was not feeling overwhelmed. It just seemed mass confusion and people very close to me. And what I felt like had given me a lot of that confidence to be able to deal with whatever COVID was going to throw, because there was this massive unknown around every area of our life. The physical health,
right?
The freedoms. We forget that there were different periods in COVID. The first 4 weeks, we were all scared as hell. We didn't know how many people were going to die.
Right.
And many of us knew people dying.
Right.
And then afterwards, we see this, the uncertainty in the streets and the physical safety. And then financially, every single one of us said, what's going to happen to our businesses? Every single one.
Right.
And I felt a level of internal peace and calm as it was coming on, and seeing a lot of people who weren't in that place. I said, what gave me the preparation for this? What was it why do I feel so different in terms of my reaction to the same life events as other people have? And I was even seeing it amongst business owners and people who did, who had similar setup to me. And what I attributed to was a lot of the things are really around the addiction work and what it took to remove the dependency I had on my addiction. And that work forced me to dig so deep. In recovery, there's an expression, they say, let go and let God, like that complete surrender of everything we know, everything we understand, to get to a trust that there is a better way. Because the dependency that's formed on an addiction is, to a degree, a proclamation that this has my answers. At the end of the day, when all else fails, I can go to porn and I'll feel a certain way. Or someone says, at the end of the day, when all else fails, I can go to alcohol and feel a certain way. And when someone goes into recovery, they're taking away that at the end of the day, when all else fails, I can go to whatever that answer is that's been removed. And that's scary as shit.
Right.
And going through that process forced me to tap into a faith, a trust in myself, in God, in the universe, and that, okay, I don't know, but there is one who does, and this will be okay. And that wasn't a thought, it wasn't a perspective, it was a lived experience.
Right.
So when COVID hit and there was a lot of confusion, I said, okay, I know I'm good. I know I'm good. Not that it was easy, it was extremely difficult, but there was within it an internal calm and an internal peace. So
because you were able to be with yourself and not dependent on something outside yourself to feel content.
Because that's the fear, right? There are all of these things that we think bring us comfort,
Right.
whether it is our work or our travel schedule or our family or our schools, whatever. Like everything just got upended. So wherever you had your comfort, it was removed for sure. Whatever it was,
Right.
whatever it was,
Right.
just whether it was, hey, I hang out with my friends and we go to
Right.
a restaurant. No, everything is lost. Now you're just sitting there and we don't know where this is going.
Right.
But to be able to find that place of internal peace that's beyond any of the noise, that was a practice that enabled me to reach that level of calm. And I said, hey, I have to share this with others. So the very first event we did, it wasn't a podcast, it was a webinar, and I called it Let Go and Let God, and just like, hey, let me talk and share about this experience. And I felt like those who went through recovery from addiction had a lot to share with everyday man. And then from there, one thing leads to another. We never know the way a path is going to evolve, open up, and here we are today.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting because Rabbi Twersky talked a little bit about that, about the hot springs. You know, the story where he had some chronic pain. He's like he was a leading figure in addiction and recovery. And so he had chronic pain, and he was advised to go to these hot springs. And when he went inside the body of water, he was told to stay there for 25 minutes. And 5 minutes in, he was feeling a lot of tension and nervousness. And he realized he couldn't be with himself.
Right, it wasn't about the hot springs. It was about being alone.
Right, exactly. But I guess there was nowhere, he was forced to be in there for his own, I guess, other kind of recovery. And that's when he realized that he needed something else, not just a physical recovery.
Right,
and maybe even it was
else.
related to each other, you know, the chronic pain and the mental anguish of feeling the sense of unease. So like with that work, like learning to be with yourself, that's why people had different reactions to COVID.
Right.
It explains a lot.
Yeah. I think it really exposed a lot of what was inside for many of us. It brought out a lot of things. So I hope that our conversation can inspire others who are either not sure about this mental health journey or already on it, but can use a little bit more fuel in their tank to that it's a worthwhile pursuit. Because in my life, it's been the number one most meaningful pursuit, has been making sure that this is okay,
right?
Which in turn makes sure that the rest is working correctly, independent of the fact that there's, as mentioned, something I'd like to be a little bit better. But that focus has been, like I said, the number one most fulfilling. And it sounds to me like it's up there for you as well. So hopefully us
I think it's
together.
Significantly important. Like, I think it's so important, especially someone like you who achieved business success. And I'm sure there's many aspiring entrepreneurs and business people who want to be like you. And for you to share that message with them can just help guide them in their values, because we're a career-driven world and society. And just to say, hey, look, you can achieve all the success in the world, but you've got to be able to be with yourself. You've got to be able to be self-aware and do the work. You know, that is huge. That's really huge.
That's been my experience, and which is very much in line with a lot of what you spoke about, is that it's coming one way or another. We're all going to deal with our mental health challenges.
Right.
We can meet it and do it on our timetable, or it will meet us and will be done in its timetable.
That's so true.
Amen. So I think on that note, thank you for joining the In Search of More podcast. And as this
thank you for the opportunity
evolves, you don't have to be a stranger. We can hear how your search of more is working out, and some of the questions that you didn't have answers that you were 100% certain of today. Maybe we can see how they evolve over time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eda. I appreciate
you for having
joining me for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.